Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com, and radio analyst John DeShazier joining us for this week's episode. Got a lot to get into, fellas. First off, it's nice to actually see y'all's faces. It's nice to be back home for a little bit for the Pels.
Yeah,
huh?
I guess you guys had to leave some breadcrumbs, to get back home because you were on the road for 6 games. Long road trip, man, and really you missed. You don't realize you missed the team when they're gone that long. So, good to have the team back. Certainly good to have them come back on a successful beginning to the 2-game homestand. But man, you guys are gone forever.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I got to see you via, Zoom and stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it was nice. And look, it's also good to be back home because the Pels played well at home since really the turn of the calendar.
Yeah, I mean, welcome back, by the way, Gus. I mean, the people that travel with the team, it wasn't like you had a lot of time to kind of get settled back in. Yeah. Come back on Saturday, play the game against the Wizards on Sunday. They practiced on Monday, so it's been pretty hectic. But yeah, I mean, they've been playing a lot better over the last, since the All-Star break, and then even a longer stretch going back further than that.
Yeah, before that long road trip, 3 of 5 games the Pels had won, and now we got a couple of games here at home. Meantime, so let's start with the first one being the Wizards, 138-118. JD, what did you see in that one?
I saw the Pelicans do what they were supposed to do. You take care of an inferior opponent. Now, everybody in the NBA, you don't want to disrespect them, but they're the Wizards, and they're probably not exactly trying to win. Trae Young played limited minutes, but if you're the Pelicans, you have to set a standard to where you want to play, what you want to be, regardless of opponent. So it doesn't matter if it's the Wizards, it doesn't matter if it's the Lakers, it doesn't matter if it's Oklahoma City, whoever it is, you want to establish a standard that you want to play to. And a little sluggish start against Washington, which expected. You're on the road for a long time. You get home, first game. But they found themselves, pretty much in the second, third quarter and turned it on and ran away with it.
I think one of the more encouraging parts of that game was just that it was another game where you didn't shoot threes very well. They were only 7 for 23, which is low makes and low volume. But they dominated the paint. So it was a formula that we've seen a lot where, you get outscored 14-7 in three-pointers made, but you're still able to overcome that. So, and I think it was another example too that we saw at least during the wins on the road trip of so many different guys contributing. And you score 138 points, you would think that there would be a lot of players that chipped in with that. So, it was a positive performance. I mean, like JD said, started off a little slow, but I mean, we know it's a 48-minute game, so just because you're down 3 at the end of the first quarter doesn't mean that it's not going to still be a 20-point win the way it was.
Yeah, and I think the 7 threes, we've been talking about this the whole season. It's really not a sustainable model. I mean, to be successful, it's just not. You've got to get some easier looks. You got to get some easier points. You can't trade out 3s for 2s. Now, again, it was Washington. You were able to get away with it. Maybe you're able to get away with it against that kind of opponent. But when the level of competition steps up, when you start getting into a different weight class, it just doesn't measure out that way. It's hard to get to the foul line 47 times. They did that against Washington. Most in a regulation game in franchise history, tying the most. You can't count on that in every game. You can't count on just being able to make 7 threes. Yes, this team is going to be dominant in the paint. They score in the paint. That's what this team does. But you've got to be able to match someone in threes, and not necessarily 18 a game, but you got to get into a respectable range of 12, 13, 14, hopefully somewhere that you can get easier points instead of having to do everything at the rim and then trying to create at the foul line, those kinds of things. It's difficult to do in today's NBA.
Yeah, it's with 16, 15 games left, it's just not going to change by this point with the three-point thing. But, Jim, I shudder to think a little bit, if you don't get to the free throw line. And what's nuts is at Phoenix, I'm not saying that the Pels need to be a 57 three-point attempt team, but when you face teams like that in the upper echelon of the West, that's going to be something you look at. But I feel like even before that road trip, the Pels were getting 30, 35 three attempts. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it depends on the opponent, too. I think in the case of the Wizards, you were just able to get by guys constantly. So it was like, why settle for a 3, especially if that's not the biggest part of your game when you can get all the way to the basket. So I think that might have been a little bit of a factor with that. I mean, it's going to vary sometimes. as much as we want to see more threes, we still would rather you would rather take a dunk every
no
time.
doubt.
So I think that's part of it, is that just getting to the paint. They had 72 paint points in that game. I mean, that was working. They were 36 for 60 from the field in the paint. So
yeah, and you want to play the game in front of you. That, as Jim said, that was the game that was in front of them. Attack the rim against this team, this particular opponent. Does that work against Toronto? Does that work against, the Clippers? We don't know. So that's when you have to be able to balance it out a little bit, because again, you can't have the opponent making 15 threes consistently, you making 7 consistently, and hoping that's going to be a winning formula.
All right, when you take a look at the standings, obviously the Pels, we'd like them to be a little higher in contending for playoff spots and seeding. But JD, what do we make of 6-3 in the last 9, 11-9 in the last 20? I feel they're playing better. It feels like they're playing better. It looks like they're playing better. But what do you make out of the numbers when the numbers are the numbers?
You see a team that's fighting. And that's what we wanted to see this entire season. We want to see a team compete, a team not give up. And even though theoretically there's no playoff berth to be playing for, they're still playing hard. They're still competing. They're still fighting. That's what you wanted to see. We wanted to see this team and not just compete. That's one thing, but put some wins behind the competing. That makes up for a whole lot of it, because you're trying to build something as you roll into next season. Look, this season, I guess statistically, standings-wise, this season actually is over. You're not going to the playoffs. But it's not over from a standpoint of what are you establishing in terms of habits, in terms of wanting to see guys improve, in terms of chemistry as you go into next season. I know it's tough to say, momentum's going to roll over into another season, but you're getting a good, solid look at what this team, you hope, will look like roster-wise and playing-wise. And you are building chemistry, because DeJounte Murray just came back. These guys hadn't played together. So getting him on the floor for these last few games of this season and rolling that into next season, hopefully everybody's staying healthy. And then you feel like, okay, now you have a vision of what you can be. And at least you got to start with that.
And if you're just listening to this and on the podcast feed and not being able to see that was John almost breaking the desk, knocking on the wood that we're sitting in front of. Yeah, I mean, I think what I've seen is the offense has definitely been better. I think over this last stretch, the defense still, I think, needs to improve, but it does feel a little bit like they're kind of unleashing DeJounte Murray on the rest of the league right now, or their opponents, because, I mean, I picture him sitting around listening to people talk about the NBA at this point in the season and saying like, there's only 15, 20 games left. There's really not that much to play for. Teams are out of the race. What difference does it make? And I picture him being like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I sat out for 13 months.
Yeah.
I've been dying to get out here on the court and do whatever I can. So, I mean, his attitude, his aggressiveness, I think, to me, is just what you expect from a guy that had to sit as long as he did. And he's not going to approach any second he's on the court like, whatever. I mean, he's going to have 5 or 6 months here coming up again to be waiting for next season to start. So I think that he's, kind of personified the team overall, that they've been aggressive and that they want to win as much as they possibly can.
Yeah, and I'll paraphrase. He didn't say exactly this way, but I wish he had, because I put it on a T-shirt. Basically, he came back and said, "Look, I ain't no chump. I'm not just coming back to come back. I'm coming back to play. I'm coming back to play well, and I'm coming back to lead this team to wins. I'm not coming back just to say, okay, let's see how the Achilles is. I'm not coming back just to say I came back. I'm coming back with some specific intent, and that is to compete and to win, and we've seen it."
And I think too that the team overall should have a kind of a chip on their shoulder of saying, like, if you put us in the bottom of the league, we don't deserve to be there. Yeah. And I feel like that's something that they can prove. That's something that DeJounte obviously can help a ton with, of showing over this last stretch of the season, that just from a pride standpoint of we can keep winning games, we can keep beating teams like the Wizards, no offense to them, and just put together a stretch that, I mean, there's no way that the final record is going to be anything that you're going to be great with and happy about, but I mean, you can get 30-ish wins, you can get over that mark and not be what you were last season where you won 21 and lost 61.
Well, I think you look at that game in Phoenix and what DeJounte can do and what he wants to will the team, in that late in that fourth quarter and what he can mean on the defensive side paired with Herb and stuff. But, Jimmy just brought up something I want to just toss real quickly and get your opinion on this because it's something that Graf and I talked about in a broadcast and I just kind of constantly think of as well. In that you hear DeJounte say, hey, I ain't no chump, right? Saddiq Bey's like, look, I'm just happy to be playing, but he's been pretty important. We've talked about it. Trey Murphy on this road trip in the locker room said, hey, look, we're here to play to win for the name in front and on behind of the jersey. We've seen Zion's level of investment, something. Saddiq Bey, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson entered that game at home against the Wizards, averaging 20 or more, Saddiq in the last 10. So I'll start with you, and then I want to get Jim's point. Are they the basis of your foundation, those three guys moving forward? And then we'll add DeJounte in it. But, I mean, those three guys adding, averaging 20, am I looking at those three guys as my foundation next year?
I think so. And obviously, as you mentioned, you add in DeJounte. But when you've got three guys who can score 20, essentially defenses don't know where it's coming from or when it's coming. Early in the games, it seems to be Saddiq Bey on the early post. Zion kind of works his way in, and he'll play a little passive early, and he'll defer, and then he'll just all of a sudden hit you with a burst. Trey Murphy is now a guy who is so multidimensional that you got to guard him at the 3-point line, but now he can get you off the bounce. Now, if you get the ball in the right hands of a good passer, well, Trey Murphy's decided to not just stand in the corner. He'll cut baseline and catch a lob on you. You can get him out on the break. So now you're able to score multi-ways with different people. And so defenses can't necessarily, or when they do load up, when they do say, okay, we've had enough of Saddiq Bey punishing our guards, we're going to send another guy at him. Well, now when you when you pass the ball out and you rotate it and you swing it, now you've got other threats that can help you, because if you get it to Zion Williamson on the wing and he's one of the guys you're swinging it to, well, now you got a crease for him to get to the basket. If you swing it around and it's Trey Murphy on the catch, he's wide open. So now you've got things where you put defenses in a compromised position where it's difficult to guard guys. You add DeJounte Murray to that, and now you add in another guy who on any given night can get you 20. So basically you have four guys who can get you 20. And that's a luxury that a lot of NBA teams don't have. And when you've got that many guys who can hit you that many different ways, now it's just a matter of developing the chemistry, getting them the ball where they want the ball, in positions where they like to attack. And then guys don't have to be greedy. They don't have to necessarily feel like I've got to force something. They can say, well, at some point in this game, it's going to be my turn. Now I just got to, wait, because my turn is coming, and I'm going to have a flurry where I'm going to get, 6 points in 3 minutes, or 8 points in 4 minutes, or 15 points in a quarter, something like that. So, it's great to have that kind of versatility offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the way that they've complemented each other, the way they're, like you kind of mentioned, that their skills kind of fit together. I mean, it feels like Trey Murphy, you can pair him with anyone because of his, his range shooting and just the way that he can space the floor. And then Zion obviously is the guy that attacks the rim. It seems like Saddiq Bey kind of does a little bit of both, which is great. And, there's been times, especially earlier in the season, where I complained about how sometimes a guy would have a big first half and then not see the ball that much in the second half with various players that happen. I like the way lately it seems like that they've all had good games at the same time. A lot of the games that they've won, they've all had 20-plus points. And not to spoil something that we're going to talk about later, but this is part of the player of the week was a 3-way tie between these three players. So, I think to your point, I think they've shown a lot in terms of the future of the team. Of these are guys that you can base everything around.
Yeah, and you want to be able to have consistency and dependability, and those guys are giving that to you. Along those lines, too, beginning of the season, if the Pels had a chance to win or won games, the rookies were kind of leading the way. In particular, Jeremiah Fear starting at point guard, so hard to do that. Well, DeJounte comes in, you have to make some moves here. I really like what I've seen off of him or by Fears off the bench. What do you look at him when you look at not just his numbers, but his productivity in the last couple of games?
I feel like going to the bench settled him somewhat. I feel like he, of course he got a lot of starting experience, but I think going to the bench, watching the game develop, he got a chance to exhale. okay, what's happening here? How can I attack? Or I'm coming off the bench, and you know what I can do? I can play as hard as I can for as long as I can. I can pick up full court defensively. I can attack offensively, and I don't have to worry because I'm not trying to pace myself. I can go out there and play as hard as I can and give this team everything I have. The only thing that I still see that I'd like to see improvement out of him is finishing at the rim. It seems like, there still are times where he seems a little bit faster, body-wise than his mind is going. But other than that, his decision-making has improved. I think he's learning better to challenge when to speed it up, when to slow it down, when to attack, when not to. I think he's better at playing within the confines of the offense because you play within the offense, it's going to happen for you if you have a little patience. You don't have to force it. You're out there with guys who actually can do some things to help you. So I think when he's playing within the confines, it slowed down for him. And he said, okay, I don't need to be in attack mode all the time. I can take my time. I can pick apart a defense. I can figure out when I want to attack. And then, he's, of course, a one-man fast break. So if you get him in those situations, he's going to get to the rim. Now, he's got to finish, but he's going to get to the rim. But I think he's just kind of taken a seat back, looked at it, and been a little bit more analytical about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been specific instances on fast breaks. You mentioned one-man fast break. You don't want to literally take that as I'm the only guy out here. Yeah. There's been a couple times where there was one in the Washington game where he had a 2-on-1. He was on the left side of the court, and he just slowed down and dropped off a pass to a guy cutting for a layup. It seems like earlier in the season he might have said, I can get by my guy, I can get to the basket, which he could, but then you have to make a finish over somebody that's a lot of times bigger than you and somebody who's athletic. So, I mean, to me, what we've seen from Jeremiah Fears and DeJounte Murray over this last stretch, it makes me think about what does this team need from its point guard? You bring up the three scorers that have all been over 20 points. To me, I think there's a bunch of dials with the point guard. Like I would want to turn some of them up and some of them down. Assist to turnover ratio, you got to turn that up. Efficiency from the floor, you got to turn that up. In terms of like, Fears is going to have games up and down shooting wise because he's a rookie. But I'd rather have a guy, a point guard on this team go 3 for 6 from the field and have 10 points than go 6 for, 4 or 17 and have more points, but just do it in more shots. Yeah. You see how many effective other offensive weapons you have. So, I mean, to me, it just affects, I think what Fears and Murray have done lately has been closer to what they need from the point guard's position. They don't need a guy who's going to come out and score 30 points because, as we talked about, they already have a bunch of other guys that can do that. And also the defense. I think Murray's defense has been really good and something that they needed with how disruptive he is. And as JD mentioned, Fears' defense has been a lot better too. I think partly with just not having to conserve his energy, playing fewer minutes, and you can just go all out the way we saw with Jose Alvarado when he was here.
Yeah, just let your teammates help you. That's what they're there for. Let them help you. If you got Trey Murphy, you got Zion Williamson, you got Sadiq Bey, you've got guys who can help you. You don't have to feel like you have to do it all by yourself. And by the way, Derek Queen also. You don't have to do it all by yourself. You can let them help you. That makes your job easier. And now you can just fit in and be more efficient, as Jim is saying. You don't have to be inefficient. You can be efficient. You can turn down the volume on the shots. You don't have to have as many to be as productive.
Yeah, facilitate and space are the two words that kept popping in my head when you guys were talking about there. Facilitate those guys when they're there, get them the ball. Space, create space to help then facilitate those guys. And when that opportunity is there, I can run past that guy. When the opportunity is there and I'm open, take the three. And I think we've seen that from Fears. And more importantly, DeJounte Murray, a really good player to kind of mimic that. Before we get to the player of the week, and also player to watch and some trending numbers, some games. By the way, guys, there's a big game coming up this week as Brandon Ingram comes back to the Smoothie King Center. First time we'll get to see him in a uniform that's not wearing a Pelican patch on there. What do you make of his time here in New Orleans? What do you think that return is going to be like?
I mean, the numbers say it was successful. 23 points a game, 5.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists. Went to the playoffs a couple of times. The disappointment is not necessarily on Brandon Ingram singularly, because Brandon Ingram came here with the expectation of playing with Zion Williamson. And so I think he came here to be 1B, Zion 1A. You get add C.J. McCollum, that's 1C. Well, now suddenly, if Zion Williamson isn't available, Brandon Ingram becomes 1A, and C.J. McCollum becomes 1B. And those are roles that those guys, I don't think were here for. I don't think those were the best roles for them. So I'm a little bit, topsy-turvy on it, because it's like there were some successes and there were some failures. Now, look, he statistically, the numbers are pretty good. Probably could have been even better, because he was not a three-point shooter here at all. You had to beg him to shoot him, and he wouldn't shoot him. So he didn't unlock all of his game when he was here, and you see a little bit more of that unlocking in Toronto from the three-point standpoint. But overall, I think it was a successful run, just because you got a couple of playoff bursts out of it that were kind of, I don't want to say surprising, but man, you always go back to, boy, if he had just been able to get out there with Zion some more, if he'd have just been able to be out there, as the three that we expected, him, Zion, and CJ, if it had just been able to be that, we'd never got an opportunity to see what that would be at all, to me. And maybe, in little bitty pockets, but we didn't get a chance to see an extended run of that. And so that's what I think most about his run, was that, he was a really good player, but he was in a position that he probably shouldn't have been in.
I mean, he was an all-star in 2020. He was, one of the best players on the team, or the best player on the team in 22 when they made the playoffs. 24, they made the playoffs. To me, the two times that they made the postseason with him are kind of symbolic of his era overall, because in 22 against Phoenix, I think he averaged 25, 5, and 5. He was amazing. Everybody was talking about him across the league. Then in 24, when they play OKC, I still to this day say that he wasn't healthy in that series, because if you watch the way he played, I know some of it was Oklahoma City's defense, but it just wasn't the same Brandon Ingram. And so, unfortunately, he had a bunch of really high peaks here, but just the health part of it was, whether it was with him or the team overall, just put a huge damper on the situation overall. And fortunately for Toronto, and unfortunately for us, if he only has to play a few more games to play more games this season with Toronto than he did any season that he was here. So it just feels like that part of it was he's 12th in the NBA in total minutes this season. Wow. After he had several seasons here where he missed a bunch of games. So, but overall, he was a great individual player. I felt like in 22 against Phoenix, we thought that this was the start of the ascendance of him, and it just didn't come together.
Yeah, and that was the thing. Again, we saw spurts of it, and we said, okay, that's the guy. But I don't necessarily think he was ever supposed to be the superstar. Now, he was really good for good stretches, but was he supposed to be the guy every night? I don't think so. And that role I don't necessarily want to say it didn't fit him, but his personality wasn't such that it seemed to fit him. And so he just seems to be more of a laid-back guy. And I just think he was meant to play with Zion, and we never got a chance to see that enough here. And that's the thing that really sticks with me about it.
And it does seem like with Scotty Barnes, Toronto has found a guy that's like the perfect pairing with him, the guy that's a really versatile guy, a really good defender, one of the best defensive players in the league. So good for him at Brandon Ingram. That it seems like he's found a good spot with the Raptors.
It matters, and what might have been is the way I remember it too. I think like one game, right, that we got to see the two-man game for them to try to win a game between those two players, and that was it. We thought we were going to see a lot of it. We just never did. All right, let's bring it home, Mr. Eichenhofer. Time for your player of the week.
The player of the week is a three-way tie between Trey Murphy, Zion, and Sadiq Bey. We already talked about this a little bit, so I'll skip to the next thing. The player to watch, I have Herb Jones, because, think about it. He's going to go up against Brandon Ingram for the first time in the game on Wednesday, which will be interesting. And then Houston on Friday night, just have to go against Kevin Durant. And then Monday against Cooper Flagg. He might get no problem. We're just asking you to guard some of the best
player to watch.
Players
That's a very good player to watch, because Jim, he's been getting in some games where he gets 2 personal fouls in the first quarter. It drives Graf nuts, but more importantly, it takes him off the floor. So that's a good player. All right, some trending numbers.
Trending number, the first one for Toronto is 5, and that is Brandon Ingram's all-time rank in total points with the Pelicans career-wise. I'm sure people can probably guess the four people above him on the list, but it's Anthony Davis, David West, Chris Paul, and Drew Holiday. B.I. scored 7,017 points with the Pelicans, so obviously a great career. Trending number for Houston is 21, and that's the Rockets' offensive efficiency ranking out of the 30 teams since January 1st. Wow. The Pelicans are 15th since January 1st, so can the Pelicans hold them down the way that they did? I think in the game in Houston, they were competitive because the Rockets' offense has kind of gone into a tailspin, not having a point guard with Fred VanVleet. It seems like over time that's really kind of caught up to them. And lastly, trending number for Dallas is 21, and that is the number of wins that the Mavericks and the Pelicans have right now. So I want to see the Pelicans. Right now they're in 5th place in the Southwest Division. They're a couple games behind Memphis as well. I know this isn't going to be an inspiring locker room speech, but can we finish in 3rd place in the Southwest Division? Since COVID, last season was the first time that the Pelicans finished in 5th in the Southwest. So 21 is the trending number for the Mavericks, just because I feel like it's a win that you need to get to hopefully finish ahead of them and get ahead of the Mavs and the Grizzlies is one of my goals.
Look, that is an inspiring speech because you're trying to show tangible steps. Get to 3rd place. You're trying to show tangible improvement, and getting to 3rd place is an improvement. It'll show some improvement. It'll show this team is hopefully moving in the right direction as it goes into next season. So, hey, it might not have backflips in the locker room, but I'm all for it.
I think it ties into what I took out of the road trip as we wrap up this podcast. You took care of teams that you struggled with probably earlier in the season. Now, can you take the next step? Can you beat teams that are currently in the playoff standings? That's where I'd like to see in the final slate of games here. As always, go to Pelicans.com to get the very latest from Jim Eichenhofer, and of course, Graf and JD will have it on the call on the radio side of things. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to the New Orleans Pelicans podcast.